Good morning and welcome to Calvary Baptist Church in our live stream of our adult Sunday school class. So glad that you're able to join us as we go through and take a look at the book of Proverbs this morning. It is a topical study, and we're going through, and we've dealt with a number of topics already, but for the last number of weeks we've been focusing on relationships and what Proverbs has to say about relationships. We've been looking at specifically family relationships. And last week, we started out and focused on children. What does Proverbs have to say to children and how they are supposed to interact and how we, even when we're grown-up children, are to be able to have a relationship with our parents and with others, just specifically the verses in Proverbs that speak to children. And the whole book is geared toward this category, and young people. The whole purpose of this book is to give you and to give children and to give us the ability, the tools, and the resources that we need to be able to make wise decisions in life. So all verses in Proverbs are written for children, for young people, but some are more specifically written to them. And so those are the ones that we are focusing on. We began last week and this week. So a large portion, we began in chapter 7, and a large portion of chapter 7 is written to warn a young man about immorality. And as we went through, there are three women that are talked about in Proverbs. There's Lady Wisdom, then there is the harlot, and at the very end there is the godly woman. Those three women kind of show up throughout the book of Proverbs. And there are a great many warnings and cautions for a young man about immorality. And just as we recap, chapter 7 begins with a young man innocently walking where he should be. It starts out with just, dabbling and just innocently getting close to the edge, and then a little bit further along he's flirting with things that he shouldn't be, and then he ends up being lured into sin, and that sin ends up destroying his life. So there's a great deal of warnings that are in Proverbs towards children and how to view life and how to conduct yourself. And chapter 7 specifically is a warning about not walking where you know you shouldn't and not indulging in just small sins because those lead to other ones. And sin, as he is trying to convey these warnings, he helps us understand that sin is a slippery slope. So don't even play with the edge. Don't even walk down those streets. Don't even walk close to temptation because it will lure you in. And another thing and another one of the principles in Proverbs is to listen to your parents. Listen to experience, listen to wisdom, and pay attention to your parents. And then chapter 10 and verse 5, even children should have a good work ethic. And again, I'm just running through some of the verses that we looked at again last week. There are a number of verses throughout the book of Proverbs that encourage a son, especially as Solomon was writing to his son, that encourage children to pay attention and to listen to their parents. Because as a child, we have an opportunity to invest in the well-being of our parents. So when I commit myself to being a wise man, when I commit myself to being a good father, and when I am listening to what Proverbs has to say, that is my investment in my parents, in their well-being, in their spiritual health. You as a child have an opportunity, or as a young person, you have an opportunity to invest in the emotional and spiritual well-being of your parents by how you act. And that's a choice that you have to make. There's a lot of times when this world kind of looks down on kids and, you can't make decisions and just kind of treats them as kids. But no matter what age you are, young or in the middle or older, you have an opportunity to, by your actions and by your decisions, invest in your parents. And that's not just children and young people, but all of us that have parents. How we act is an opportunity for us to invest in the emotional and spiritual well-being of our parents. And so there's a number of verses that kind of point that out. and that make a very serious case and help us to understand that we should not mistreat our parents or treat them poorly. So there's a number of chapters. That was 19 and verse 27 that we looked at. And then 20 and verse 11 encourages us to have a good work ethic. Doesn't matter how young you are, people know your reputation and your work ethic. So I'm just running through as a brief overview, and I wanted to remind you, I forgot to put up our notes last week, but the notes that are up on our webpage, come to calvary.ca, are the ones that we are covering this week. They should be the current ones. So if you want to follow along with us and see what we looked at last week, the notes should be there for you. You can download a copy of those and follow along. I believe we finished up at Proverbs 28 and verse 7. That's the first verse that I will read for you this week, and we'll pick up from there. We have a shorter lesson today as we're wrapping up family relationships, and we'll talk about relationships, I think, one more week. There's just a few other verses that we'll cover next week, but Proverbs 28 and verse 7. Whoso keepeth the law is a wise son, but he that is a companion of riotous men shameth his father. There's principles all over the place, and you've probably heard the principle here from other sources of wisdom. Perhaps your parents have already told you, be careful who you hang out with. Well, this is the Bible's way of saying that. Be careful who your friends are. Whoso keepeth the law is a wise son, but he that is a companion of riotous men shameth his father. Be careful who your friends are and who you hang out with. Just the fact that you hang out with the wrong people is a cause of shame. It makes your parents nervous and anxious, and it also causes you shame as well. So there's a lot of times when I know as young people we think, well, it doesn't really matter who I hang out with. I'm not being influenced by them. They're just my friends. But that's not the case. The Bible says who you hang out with impacts both yourself and how you make decisions, and it also impacts your reputation. So be careful who you hang out with. And specifically here, he encourages us, and the principle is don't hang out with specifically drunkards, partiers, or those who like to cause problems. So when it says riotous men, that's the group that he's talking about. Drunkards, partiers, and those who like to cause problem. The contrast is whoso keepeth the law, and where the riotous men, they couldn't care less what the law says or what God has to say or what authority has to say. So the principle is right there for us. On one side, you have a wise son, one that is that builds and has a tremendous wisdom and ability to make proper decisions because they maintain and they are careful who they hang out with. On the other side, you have someone who causes shame, a child who causes shame because of the people that they hang out with. So be careful who your friends are. Be careful who you're hanging out with. And if you find that the people that you're around tend towards being drunkards all the time, and they tend toward having a disrespect or a disgust for the law and for authority, then you need to be careful with that. Because that shame, there is shame that comes from that. So be careful who you hang out with. The next verse is in that same chapter, Proverbs 28 and 24. And this is a very serious one. It says, whoso robbeth his father or his mother, and saith, it is no transgression, the same is the companion of a destroyer. And I want to read what a couple commentaries have to say about this and then make some comments. One commentary said, a son who robs his parents might excuse it on the grounds that it will be his eventually, but God is not deceived. He puts that person in the same class as a robber or a murderer. the principle is very, very, very clear. If it's not yours, don't take it. Even if it belongs to someone in your family, it's not yours, don't take it. That's what is being talked about here. There's a person, there's a son, there's a child who looks at what the family has, looks at what his father and mother have, and then takes it without any consideration, without any thought, without any asking, without asking for it. He is in essence stealing. And most people, and I know because I've heard these excuses before, most would say it's no problem. They're my family. It's my dad's. I can take it. I'm his son. I'm fine. It's no problem. But in God's eyes, as God looks at that, as God sees that, it's the same as theft. And it puts you, he says, it puts you in the same category as a destroyer. And we've seen that word before. It is a very intense word. It means just to completely lay waste to something. So when you just treat it as an insignificant thing, to take what does not belong to you, even if it's in your family, it puts you in the same category as a companion of a destroyer, a robber, and a murderer. So there's a lot of times when we look at sin, we look at things as if they're no big deal, but we need to start viewing things from God's perspective and understand the reality of what that is. So if it's not yours, don't take it. Even if it will eventually be yours, don't take it. It is a very serious thing in God's eyes to take advantage of the relationship that we have with our parents for our own personal gain. To disrespect them, to treat them like they're insignificant, or to steal and to rob from them. They're a companion of a destroyer, of robbers and murderers. And I could go on, I have more to say, but let's move on to the next verse. Proverbs chapter 30. Beginning in verse 11, down through verse 17. This section of verses describes a lot of things here. So let's, verse 11 of Proverbs chapter 30, it says, "There is a generation that curseth their father, doth not bless their mother. There is a generation that are pure in their own eyes, and yet is not washed from their filthiness. There is a generation, oh, how lofty are their eyes, and their eyelids are lifted up. There is a generation whose teeth are swords, their jaw teeth is knives, to devour the poor from off the earth, and the needy from among men. The horse leech hath 2 daughters, saying, Give, give. There are 3 things that are never satisfied. Yea, 4 things say, It's not enough. The grave and the barren womb, the earth that is not filled with water, and the fire that saith not, It is enough. The eye that mocketh at his father, and despiseth to obey his mother, the ravens of the valley shall pick it out, and the young eagles shall eat it." There's a very vivid picture here, and that's, again, you've heard me say it before. One of the reasons why I love Proverbs is because it is so vividly written. It is so pictographic. He paints wonderful pictures, and he also paints very serious pictures of this generation. And he's not talking about a specific generation. He is naming these things that every one of us should be careful of. And a lot of them are often attributed with children and with young people. But these are things that every generation has had to deal with. The main motivating thing behind so many of the things that he talks about here is pride. And it's a warning to not be proud. To understand the reality of who you are, but not to be so proud that you disregard anyone and anything else. So if some of the things that are being described in these verses describe you, then you have a pride problem that you need to deal with. That's what he's doing. He is listing these things and talking about this generation that, again, it's not one specific one, but if any of the things that are described here are true of you, then you can identify and you know that you have a pride problem that you need to deal with. So, if you curse your father, and we've looked at other verses before, it's to render him insignificant, to just not want to have anything to do with him, to not to listen to him. And this is a father that is loving and that is caring for you. This is a father that is invested in your life. If you are rebelling against that, if you have so much pride and say, just, he is insignificant, I don't want to have anything to do with him, I don't want to listen to anything that he has to say, there is a pride here that is being described, and that curseth or does not bless their mother, isn't even thankful for anything that their mother has done for them. This is a heart attitude. It's not talking about a specific situation, but it's a heart attitude of pride that causes you to rebel against a godly father and mother. It says, they're a generation that are pure in their own eyes, yet is not washed from their filthiness. If you firmly believe that you've never done anything wrong and you're just the best thing that there is, you could have a pride problem. That is what is being described here. A generation that is pure in their own eyes. If every other generation, if every other group of people is just, we are doing things the best that there ever is, and we are the best that there has ever been, then that's a pride issue. If there's nothing wrong in your own eyes, if you're never at fault, then you might have a pride issue. He says, the generation, oh, how lofty their eyes, their eyelids are lifted up. And again, he is just so vividly describing this pride, how the face is upturned, looking down on other people. If any of these things are describing you, then there is a pride issue. In verse 14, a generation whose teeth are as swords, their jaw teeth as knives. Unfortunately, we're in the middle of this quarantine. And because of that, social media has taken a larger influence in our lives. And it is very disturbing and very discouraging sometimes to see the nastiness that comes out there. And not just there, but even in interactions between people outside of that, and even before this quarantine thing. There are people who just drip venom from their voices. And they are nasty and catty and just horrible people to be around, and cause injuries and wounds in people because of their language and what they say and how they interact with people. And if you are someone who has that ability, or who regularly causes someone to be injured with your words, if you struggle with that, then that's a pride issue. It's not, oh, I'm just that way, and I've just been born, I just speak my mind. No, if you're being nasty, that's a pride issue. That's a sin issue. That's not a, oh, my character's this way issue. That's a pride issue. Whose teeth are as swords and their jaw teeth as knives, to devour the poor from off the earth and the needy from among men. Don't be prideful, because it will only lead to your own destruction. Next, in Proverbs 31, in verse 28, a wonderfully appropriate one for today. Her children arise up and call her blessed, her husband also, and he praiseth her. Oftentimes, we think of our parents as the people whose job it is to look after us. But if they have done something right, they're still, parents are still people. They're not just parents. So if they've done something right, something commendable, as a husband, as a child, praise them. If your parents have done a good job on something, it's okay to tell them that. In fact, you should tell them that. And especially today on Mother's Day, and often and unfortunately it's only on Mother's Day that we take time to look at our moms and tell them, we appreciate you, we love you, here's breakfast in bed and a homemade card sometimes. It is important to know and to understand that we need to praise. We need to give thanks. The wonderful opportunity that we have on Mother's Day is to take an opportunity and specifically focus on the fact that we love, that we appreciate our moms. But this is something that should go on throughout our lives. Just because they're your parents doesn't mean that you should treat them as if it was their job to look after you. Be sure that you are thankful to them for what they've done. Again, the entirety of the book, and these verses in particular weren't written by Solomon, they were written by King Lemuel, but they are wisdom nonetheless, whether it was from Solomon or not, they are wisdom. And it encourages us, it challenges us. If your mother has done a good job, tell her. Not just today, but next week, when she does something and you just find out that, I'm really thankful. Tell her. Tell your parents that you're thankful for them. Parents are not just people whose job it is to look after us. They are people who are invested in us, who love us, and we should be thankful for them. Again, the aim of this book is to help us acquire and apply God's wisdom to the decisions and activities of daily life. So understand the book of Proverbs. Understand the role that you have as a child. Proverbs is very clear in helping us understand that no matter what age you are, you have a responsibility and you have an impact on the world around you and specifically on your family. So whether you're 5, 15, 25, or up, as a child and as a person, you have an opportunity by how you act to impact your parents, to impact your reputation, how people see you, and to have a positive impact for the Lord, for God. So we have a responsibility. We have an opportunity to be able to use our lives at whatever and every stage to be able to bring our parents joy, to invest in their lives for their own emotional and physical well-being, and also to invest in our own reputations. Because your reputation starts as soon as you start making decisions about how you're going to interact with your parents, and all the way till you're a family of your own, you have kids of your own, and your parents are older. You still have an opportunity to invest in their emotional and spiritual well-being by how you interact with them, by how you interact with the world, and how you interact with your family. The book of Proverbs is a wonderful showcase of the love that God has for us and the investment that he has in our lives, because he gives us the truth that we need to be able to properly make decisions and to be able to be who God wants us to be. So take time to look through and to think about the wisdom in Proverbs and apply that to your daily lives. God bless you, folks, and we'll see you soon.